welcome back to the podcast. We're thrilled to have you here. I have to say, I love the response we got from the previous one. Vast improvement having Connie here. Kept things rolling and added, as we said, a level of intellectualism that was usually quite absent. But
it's been missing.
It's been missing. But it was just an awesome conversation. I was blessed by it. I was left that recording time going like, whoa.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I think if you haven't checked it out, like it would be a good plug to go and watch the last week's podcast, which was on resilience and sort of collectively experiencing the last 2 years and what are some things that might be telling us we're, we're tired and
what you are
probably not handling.
May be trauma.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so it was great. It was fun to have Connie here. I enjoy doing podcast episodes with her on occasion like that. It just is fun, man. But like she brings, this is a moment where like her research is just very, very timely.
Almost like God equips certain people with certain messages at certain times.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Weird. So we're talking about Luke 13 today. We've backtracked a little bit in the Gospel of Luke, but healing on the Sabbath.
Yes.
And I like the fact that when we both preach, we really do, like we share ideas and thoughts and we talk about stuff beforehand, but then when we both preach, it obviously what the end result is different. It's not like we preach the same sermon. That would be awkward. It'd be hard to do, but
and then my daughter Anna. Connie and I. One of the things we really think about when we're away together is
It would just not go well. But the thing that I found, so sometimes when we preach, it's like we lean into the same or very similar points, and then on this week we didn't.
No.
So you get this
really cool.
You get this short story in Luke 13.
Yep.
It's
7 verses.
Right. And Jesus heals a woman who'd been crippled. And he heals her on the Sabbath. There are varying responses. So it's very short, but there's a lot going on. And we took very different paths through the passage. So I focused
in and of itself is cool.
Absolutely.
And a good reminder, friends, that even in 7 verses, we can see different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And neither are wrong, and neither are more important than another.
2 fully developed, formed sermons, thoughts, arguments in 2 different very directions, but related. So you leaned into the idea of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And, that's found in the reactions of the Pharisees to the healing on the Sabbath.
Yep.
And I leaned into the Sabbath and what the healing on the Sabbath is actually saying
the
about.
Purpose.
Saying about the Sabbath and the world and the law and gospel and, God's economy sort of moving forward, how we balance those things.
Yeah.
So we wanted to take two questions today, but basically one on hypocrisy and one on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So I would love it if you helped us think through how to identify hypocrisy in our own lives.
Sure.
Because again, I think it's really easy to stand in judgment.
Yes.
Like we stand on the side of Jesus and we say, oh, those silly Pharisees.
Those Pharisees. Come on. I'd never be that guy.
And we've got to stand on the receiving end of some of those things, right? And that's a hard thing to do. So Jesus says, you hypocrites. And we're like, yeah, that's great. You hypocrites.
Tell him, Jesus.
And Jesus is like, those words actually
dude, you're a hypocrite.
Need to be turned on ourselves.
Yeah.
So how do you identify or begin to identify hypocrisy in your own life?
I think one of the largest indicators of hypocrisy is the absence of humility. As I pointed out on Sunday, you guys know me, you know me. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe there's a blind spot there, something we don't see in ourselves. That's not hypocrisy.
Right.
That is blissful ignorance. It's a blind spot. It's something that we don't know about ourselves, and therefore there's a different level of accountability. Doesn't mean you're not accountable, right? If you don't know that the speed limit has changed and you zoom through, you're still accountable for your speed, but the reasons are different,
right?
And therefore the consequences may be different. Hypocrisy is the person that's pulled over for speeding and says, well, so you're saying this is the most important thing you need to do in your day? Why aren't you looking for other crimes? Right? Like, nope, you are accountable for what you've done. But so again, the hypocrisy is not the blind spot. Hypocrisy isn't even holding a strong conviction. There's nothing wrong with that. I think Scripture, if we follow Jesus's example and the teachings of Scripture, we should develop a very strong conviction in our lives about a myriad of things. Having the conviction isn't the issue. It's the being so strong in your conviction that you start to make exceptions, and you're no longer humble to the fact that you create exceptions for yourself. Right? That it's more about condemning others than it is about even not even. You're no longer upholding what it is that you're fighting against.
Yeah.
It's about holding other people accountable for something that you do not hold yourself accountable for.
Right. Right. And like, this is what Jesus fleshes out when he says, hey, like, listen, doesn't each of you take your ox and donkey out for water? Right. Like, and this is the thing that's fascinating to me in this passage is, and I said something along these lines on Sunday, but like, it's not the fact that Jesus healed that gets the Pharisees upset.
Yeah.
They're
it's
like,
the day, it's the how, it's the when.
So they're like, hey, listen, there are 6 other days. Go back, like, come back on one of those days to get healed. And that, like, that's the moment where they've used the law to condemn.
Yes.
Rather than to bring life. And that's like, that's the hypocrisy. I like the image of like the hypocrite. In historical context is this play actor who puts a mask on, portrays another person. And then at the end of the play, if they had done a good job, they take the mask off and they would have been met with applause. Like that's, if they had convincingly played the character, they would have been met with applause. And if they didn't, then they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that's the origin of this word hypocrite and hypocrisy. It's a play actor. And so there's like, I think it's safe to say, and your thoughts on this, it's safe to say that there's like an intentionality involved in hypocrisy.
That word was just in my mind. There is an intentionality there because, and let's be fair. A hypocrite is an ugly thing.
Yeah.
And not to be tossed around lightly. But a very real thing because it does show an intentionality to deceive. I mean, I guess kind of doubling down on what I said before. It's not something you're not aware of. It is something you are aware of.
Right.
And the intention is to deceive, and that is a dangerous thing. Yeah. And this is an important line for us to draw around things. When we find ourselves offended by something, it's very important to pause and take in the larger context of what's happening and to take in the whole picture. There are lots of people that make mistakes in life quite innocently, right? They're doing their best. And there's a big difference, friends, between someone putting their foot in their mouth when they get passionate about something and somebody who is hiding a truth and continuing to come down hard about that very same thing. There's a tremendous difference. And again, the difference is intention. Is the intention to build oneself up, or is it to address the thing in the room? And I think as I shared on Sunday, that verse 17 for me is the one that really puts it home when Jesus, after he said all this, those who opposed him were put to shame because they knew they were wrong. Right? There isn't oh my goodness. It's not a light bulb aha moment of like, whoa, thank you, Lord. You've shown me something I didn't know about myself. Right. There is a right and just shame that comes upon them when their hypocrisy is called out and brought to light. And you said something really cool when we were chatting before about shame and the place that it plays in this, and that Jesus doesn't set out to shame them. Shame is what comes out from the truth.
Yeah, I think it's, so this is, my translation is they're humiliated. They're humbled, maybe like they feel guilty. Like there's a number of different ways. Like I always say that like the gospel doesn't lead to shame.
No.
And doesn't so if and I think that there's a difference between being stuck in shame cycles and feeling ashamed of actions.
We should.
And so that's the thing. And maybe like if you want to use like guilt to kind of pit those against each other, like it is a conviction that leads toward life. And that's the thing that I see in these interactions with the Pharisees is the thing that always it's how the story ends, or it's almost that it ends that becomes the problem.
Right.
Because hypocrisy is a problem. Like probably more people leave the church. This is not a stat that I know off the top of my head, but I would imagine like more people leave the church. It's a Grant
stat. Yeah.
More people leave the church because of hypocritical Christians than because of Jesus. Right? Like it's not that people encounter a God and then they say, I don't want any part of that God. It's that they encounter Christians and they're like, I don't want any part of that culture.
Yeah.
And so like hypocrisy is a real important thing. So there was a Barna study, and again, I don't remember the percentages, but there's a Barna study that came out, which is an organization in the States that does research, and specifically for us, for our sake, research in churches.
Church data. Yeah.
And one of the questions was put to people who would identify as non-Christian or irreligious or atheist agnostic, distance themselves from Christianity. And the question was something along the lines of, do you perceive or see Christians and their actions to align more with the actions of Jesus or the actions of the Pharisees? And overwhelming majority, I think it's in like the 70%, and I have to go and actually check, but overwhelming majority said that they see Christians currently acting more in line with the Pharisees than in line with Jesus. And so hypocrisy is a very important thing for us to talk about in the church and to own, because it's not a death sentence. Like it's not, and that's the thing that the Pharisees, like in their interactions with Jesus, it's always so final.
Yes.
And I read this and I go, so Jesus is like, you hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from its stall and lead them to water? And then they go, oh yeah, you're right. Would you forgive us for that and teach us how to, live into life? How does that shape the way we act toward this woman? No, it's like, they go away and they grumble, or they say nothing because
Which is so us too, right?
Yeah, like it's
when
in the
someone
reaction.
points out it's like, yeah, but you shouldn't have healed her today, right? Like that's usually the response. Like Catherine and I had this fantastic blow up last night with our kids about volumes being used at bedtime when the twins are already asleep, and I was like, guys, you gotta keep your voices down. And Catherine was coming at it from her emotion place of like, we got to handle what's happening here. I'm like, and you got to keep your, like, if you wake up the twins, I'm going to be miffed, right? Like, that's not cool. But both of us were in this place of like, yeah, but where I am, instead of going, yes, and, right? Like, it's the but versus the and, friends.
Yeah.
And so often the Pharisees, it's the but, right? And I think it also links back to the point you said before about who we identify with in the story. We like to be Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think the Pharisees liked being God on earth, right? Like that was, for lack of a better term, their role. That was the role of the priests, right? Was to be the figures of God, the figurehead of God among the people. And then this Jesus guy comes along and goes, actually, that's me. And they're like, yeah, no, that's us. Yep. So there is no but. Like, there's no and, it's but. Like, no, but you need to listen to us.
Sure. Yeah.
And that stops the growth. It stops us from going, shoot, I was wrong about this.
Yeah. So I think curiosity is, like, if we're going to get really practical, I think curiosity is one of the best ways to, like, fight this hypocrisy piece.
Sure.
Is to intentionally learn to be curious. And I think like it's one of the, and I can't remember where I've heard these, like, this suggestion of curiosity. Like it's not, it's not a new idea to me. It's something that I've come across in many different places. But, as we get older, you tend to become more of what you already are.
Sure.
Right. So like, you run into these elderly folks who are just absolute gem human beings and super open and super, just like up for anything. And then, you meet people who are just very set in their ways and very, for lack of a better word, like stubborn or whatever. And like, I even know in my own life, like as I get older, I'm like, wow, where did that come from?
Right.
Like, why am I so, why am I so set in that? And I think it's like, we become more of those things. We don't like, I don't think there's like regression to the mean in humanity, like as we develop. I think we become more extreme, and I think curiosity is one of those things that if you want to not become so set in what you think is right and wrong, stay curious. Well, like tell me why you think that.
Keep looking.
Tell me what it is about my actions that you see as problematic. Tell me more. That is, we live in this cultural moment that is so polarized.
Ugh, yeah, we were talking about this before.
And I think that tell me more question or prompt is a solution to this moment that we're in, because what's going to avoid the instant polarization? It's, can you just like, I would love to see
help me understand
things.
that.
Yeah. Help me understand where you're coming from. We don't do that well right now. And I think like introspectively in moments, where you have this opportunity to double down, like, no, you're wrong, but you're acting like you're right. And maybe even condemning or trying to convict others out of like, it's that moment of, oh no, wait, like I need to actually just remain open to these ideas and to the possibility that.
And that's the beauty of this passage too, is that, friends, we can always choose to respond differently. We might live in a world where people will come at you saying you're wrong, but our response doesn't need to be, no, I'm not, you are. Right? Like it can be, I would love to talk to you about that. Right? And then we're in the moment where, as I was talking about on Sunday, like I think the biggest difference here is the Pharisees don't see themselves as the people that could need healing.
Right.
Whether they are aware of that, or they've just entirely shut themselves off from that because of this perception they have of themselves. But this woman comes going like, hey, whatever you can do for me, Lord, whether it's good for me to be in synagogue, right? I'm a daughter of Abraham. I need to be here. Maybe she had her heart set on being healed. We don't know. We don't know that part about her at all, but we know she was there and she totally knew who she was and was healed as a result, I think. But yeah, that willingness to engage, that willingness, and again, like that doesn't dissolve your conviction, friends, right? Like it acknowledges that, hey, we've talked about this before, disputable matters. If I get to the point where I question whether or not Jesus is the Son of God, I probably need to step down from my role.
Yeah.
Everything else, okay. Right? Like,
and
not back to its basic form, but in everything else, tell me what you're thinking about that.
Right.
Help me to know, help me to test where I'm at, to say, I don't want to be the hypocrite that says this or that.
Being open to conversation doesn't need to be a scary thing.
Sure.
And I think that we handle conversation like we've handled doubt in the past. Like we see, and I think historically in the church, we've seen doubt as this slippery slope that like, if you start asking questions, you're going to start doubting. If you have doubts and start expressing it, you're going to eventually not be a Christian. And like, that's kind of or
it could leave you to a place where Jesus says, hey, Thomas, put your hand right here.
Right. And so, we need to not be afraid of conversation. It's okay to have convictions.
Yes.
It's okay to have beliefs. It's okay to be very sure of them. But actually, I think what our fear of conversation shows is that we're not as certain as we like to pretend we are. Again, hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But it's that piece. So if you are, I mean, like just as a very practical way to turn, because let's spend a little bit of time talking about Sabbath.
Yes.
like if you're afraid of people challenging your convictions or your theology or your understanding or your thoughts or your principles, like there's probably something worth exploring there. And if you shy away from conversation, we just encourage you to lean into conversation.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, it's going to help you develop a deeper sense of your own conviction. You might actually even change your mind on things.
You may, like, but there's nobody in Scripture that I see Jesus condemn for being humble.
Right.
Plenty who are condemned and called out for being rigid. And again, that's not the same as being wishy-washy.
Right.
It's not the same. You can hold your convictions and be willing to listen.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Like I'm not talking at this as the example to follow in my entire life. I know there's been times where I have been a resounding hypocrite in how I've planted my feet in something and not being willing to listen. And so it's the journey, friends. It's the journey. And don't be the Pharisee that just says, no, that can't possibly be the case, and carry on. Let's change gears entirely.
Okay.
Sabbath.
Yep.
Great message. I enjoyed it. And a fantastic challenge for this day and age, especially as we've had 2 years of like, if you want to take Sabbath, I am providing space to do that. Yeah. No, I'm not actually. I'd rather fill it with learning how to make my own bricks in my basement. Right. Like whatever. But, in this story, I think the point Jesus makes is like, guys, yes, the Sabbath is meant for rest, and healing someone is a beautiful thing to do on the Sabbath. Grant, I wonder if I could ask you, how do we know where to draw that line? Because as we look around in our world, there is always something we can be doing. So how do we draw that line between resting and still being faithful servants who are serving and seeking to help others?
Yeah, this is a good question. I feel like we could spend an hour. So there's like a couple of things just really quickly that I want to hit on. So one, like Jesus,
that's not what I preached. No,
yeah. One, missed the mark completely. I was on, like I was in, aren't we still in Nehemiah? No. I think that like we always see Jesus act out of a rhythm of what we would call spiritual discipline. So Jesus in his ministry demonstrates a rhythm of prayer and rest and Sabbath. And it's like, I mean, it seems cliche, but like you can't give what you don't have.
Absolutely.
And so these moments in Jesus's life and ministry come out of a place of fullness. And so I think that would be one thing, right? Is that each of us need to begin by establishing our own rhythms of life and grace and rest and Sabbath and, good sleep hygiene, good spiritual disciplines of scripture. And like I say sleep hygiene, like that's one that I've always struggled with, right? Is
I don't at all.
Right. Like staying up 100%. Too late. And anyways, 100%. So that like all of those things that like you can't give continuously out of what is not stored up inside of you. And so I think that that's the starting place is, when it comes to these disciplines, and I mean, we're talking about hypocrisy, right? But like, don't go try to fix somebody else. Like if you're not also trying to right things in yourself. And so, Jesus acts out of these rhythms. Like I love that line of like Eugene Peterson in The Message that says like, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. This is the invitation of Jesus. And so I think it's those rhythms, and you're going to find them in rhythms of discipline. And so you need to develop habits and practices that bring life for you. And so like Sabbath is not just sleep. It's not, but it's a part of it. It's a part of rest and getting those. But again, like, it's not just like, Sabbath isn't a vacation in the sense of like if you're exhausted for 50 weeks in the year, and then you take 2 weeks off and you go to like Alaska or to Hawaii or to the Caribbean or whatever, and like
to sleep and soak up the sun and get the vitamin D you're going to be missing for the rest of the year.
You haven't fixed the other 50 years. You've just taken a break from it. And again, like Sabbath is not that. It's not that break. It's a rhythm that builds life into the everyday of your week to week. And so it's about building these practices in all the way through. So like if you don't have that base, then it's going to be very hard. You're going to bump up against a ceiling really quickly. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing that I would say is like, I these healings that happen, and like it's Jesus. So you got to think like, the dude knows what's going to happen.
Pick when and where you heal people, folks.
But
really.
Hear me out.
Yeah.
So Jesus is teaching in the synagogue. He's not going out looking for people to heal. It comes to him. And I think that there is a place of saying, so for me, as a dad and a husband and a pastor, Sabbath looks weird, because it's actually closer to the Jewish practice of Sabbath in terms of the time of the week. Like Sunday is not a Sabbath for us. Sunday is work. Like it's full on and it's exhausting.
Yep.
And so like, let's not pretend that Sunday is a day of rest. It's not. But Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown, that's a lot closer for me.
Sure.
And that's when so I take Friday, Saturday off, because then I can still feel like I can get stuff done on Friday and hopefully have Saturday to rest. And it doesn't always work, and I'm not always great at it. And that's, I need to own that. Otherwise, hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But, there's a rhythm that I need to practice in my life as a in my family life. So, what does Sabbath, what I need to decide, Connie and I, my wife and I need to decide together with our kids, and eventually when they're old enough, invite them into that conversation. What is Sabbath going to look like to us, for us? And then as we go about those practices,
sure,
what are the things that come to us?
Right.
And so, I think that that's another easy way to say, okay, like lean into practices that are life-giving and that bring rest. And that, so I talk about Sabbath as like, again, like Eugene Peterson, it's praying and playing, which is great. Like it's right and it's easy to remember. Sometimes sayings aren't always right. They're easy to remember, but they're wrong.
You're like, that's a horrible saying. Why do we say that?
Right. This one is right and it's easy to remember. But it is about directing our attention and our affection toward God. So it might mean going for a run for some people. Like I find that life-giving. It is restful for me. I do that most Saturday mornings in a way that draws me into community, in a way that orients me to the world in a healthy way. With other people. It's not by myself. It's with a friend. And so there are pieces that I believe, while that wouldn't honor not working technically, like I'm making my body work.
Yep.
It, I think, honors the spirit because it calls me into some of these things that the Sabbath was always meant to bring. So it brings life, calls me into community. And, it's a mental health piece. I'm a better dad because of it. I'm a better husband because of it. So all of those check marks, and, it's a moment of interacting with God's creation. So like, you just have to think through some of those things. So, if in the course of Sabbath practice, something is presented to you to bring life to somebody else, then do that. But don't fill your day attempting to do something.
Sure.
Even if it's maybe a good thing.
Sure.
If it is like to all these detriments. So I'm trying to think of like a good example. But like,
go ahead.
We're going to run out of time. You may have a practice of going out to a restaurant and an opportunity to buy somebody a meal might be presented to you.
Cool. Yeah.
Maybe that's a really simple thing.
I think if we boil it all down, one of the things I love about this is that it's letting God be God.
Yep.
And remember that we're not him.
Yep.
There's things we can do for others. There's things we can do for ourselves. Let God be the judge. let God be the one that sets the standards.
Yeah.
And let us be in relationship with him and not try and replace him.
Yeah. And don't beat yourself up about it. Right. And I think that's the other thing is, you've got to be open to these opportunities, and you've got to be open to what God is going to call you into, and then let it go.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you'll know, all right, maybe next time the
kingdom won't collapse.
Right. Exactly.
If I misplay this one conversation, and again, it's that humility to come back and say, maybe I shouldn't have done that day.
Right.
Maybe, you know what? I think I came down a little too hard in that chat we had yesterday. And I wonder if you could help me think about this more, or just say, I'm sorry.
I think you'll know. I think you'll know. Like, hey, next week I got to ditch my phone in another room, turn it off entirely. Or next week we're not going to try to build a fence in our backyard on Saturday. We thought it would be life-giving, but we ended up in an argument. Like, you'll know. You will, and it's this thing, right? As preachers, like Sunday is a massive moment for us. And it's not the be all and end all. There are a lot of other hours in the week. And this is part of the reason why we're doing this podcast. But, it's like, you kind of got to walk away and be like, and Sunday's coming again.
Yeah.
Right. And your Sabbath will come again. And it's about that rhythm and routine and learning a habit more so than individual moments.
And over all of that, God is sovereign.
Yeah.
There's nothing that will happen in a moment that God will turn a blind eye to, and not be fully willing to chat with you about. Yeah. Or later.
So try to be humble and try to practice Sabbath.
Love it.
That's it.
Yep.
Okay.
Winners.
We hope you have a great week, and we hope in some way that this has encouraged you. If it has, leave a comment. Leave a comment below. Post a question if you want us to tackle something, and even hit the subscribe buttons. It actually helps. It helps when we post videos. If you're not subscribed to the church's channels, it helps when we post these for more people to see them as they're being posted. So again, have a good week, and we will see you in another episode.
And next week is Holy Week.
Yeah.
So there's going to be something a little different playing out. There might not be a regular podcast episode.
Oh, there will be no podcast episode.
There will be content
Yeah.
To engage with. And so have a blessed Holy Week and fantastic Easter. And we'll see you on the flip side.